Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fanfiction Tapes. Season 2 starts right now. I'm your host today, Maya, pronouns she, her, and I'm joined by...
My name is Sarah. I use she, her pronouns. I am a fanfiction writer as well as an editor on my school's literary magazine and an English major. So I know writing in general pretty well, I'd like to say.
And as always, I am our producer, Ian, and my pronouns are he and him.
Today's episode, to start off our month of July, focused all around comedy, is punching up and punching down. To start off a month all about comedy, we wanted to talk about how you should do comedy right and why you sometimes have to be careful with comedy. To introduce some terms to our viewers, punching up is creating a joke targeted towards typically the powerful in society, someone who has societally more power than you. Whereas punching down is making a joke targeting someone such as a social minority, often histories of oppression or very low representation in media. A good example of some of these for punching up could be making fun of Donald Trump for baby hands, which was something that happened in, one example is Epic Rap Battles of History. That's one of the things they do to make fun of him. That's actually generally, I think, a good show for punching up. But punching down, a pretty well-known case is Dave Chappelle's recent-ish comedy series, comedy stand-up thing, The Closer, in which he makes fun of the transgender population repeatedly. And that's a case where, as a rich comedian, he has a lot more societal power than your average trans person who, many of his viewers, that's their only exposure to trans people. And that kind of leans into the general theme for today's episode. It's about responsibility and, well, punching. Maybe to start some good discussion off, Ian, I believe you originally wrote in our notes on the schedule about grand rules for being funny.
It's basically what you were saying in the intro there about what is punching up and what is punching down. Are you making a joke where the butt of the joke is somebody who has more social cachet, more social power than you do, or are you making fun of someone or a group that generally does not have much social power? It's at best in bad taste to do the latter. And at worst, it's reinforcing prejudice and stereotypes that contribute to a minority having less power.
Yeah, one of the reasons I mentioned low representation when talking about punching down was that trans people don't get a lot of representation in media. And so for people who will see stuff like J.K. Rowling's tweets, or they'll see what Chappelle makes jokes about, for them, that the only time they're seeing anything about trans people is in that instance. We're a pretty small minority of the general global population. And a lot of people just don't really interact with us. They don't see us in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, undeniably. I think something that, if you want to look deeper into punching down versus punching up, is that when you're punching up, you're typically punching at the kind of like assumed like hierarchy, like punching up at maybe, a cis straight white man, right? And so when you're punching up like that, you're not necessarily presenting any sort of like false ideas, because we all, for the most part, know and like interact with that. That is kind of the overarching like power structure. That's who like the default is assumed a lot of times when you're reading or writing media. A lot of texts in like the literary canon, which is a term that's used to refer to like books that we consider like important important, that are like worth being studied or whatever, a lot of those are about, straight cis white men. I don't know why I said straight and het, but you get my point. But when you turn around and you're punching down at these more marginalized communities, not only, like Ian said, is it potentially in bad taste, but you could also be misrepresenting these communities that, like Maya said, already don't get a lot of representation. And that's something that might be hard for some people to grasp. But I think that it's something that's really important, that when you're talking about marginalized communities, no matter how you're doing it, you are probably contributing to the representation. And so it becomes something that's really important, especially if you are not part of that marginalized community. But especially because jokes can, especially with punching up or punching down, are about making fun of people. Then with punching down, you fall into making fun of this group that already doesn't have a lot of power and doesn't necessarily have the power to rebuff or push off your attacks.
Yeah, that's a lot of very salient points there, Sarah.
Thanks. I think I repeated what you guys said a lot.
A little bit, yeah.
It wasn't the best. But yeah, I made an attempt. This unfortunately isn't my area of expertise. But I am happy to be here nevertheless. So
you didn't touch on something I want to talk about in this episode. Is kind of a theme of responsibility, especially for the authors and potentially some of our listeners who are cis, who are white, who are straight. Unfortunately, the way the world is, you guys are a little bit more likely to get published than we are. And you also have a greater responsibility when including minorities that you're not a part of in your works to make sure you do a good job. And that includes when you have humor, including us. Because not all humor about us is bad. It's who is being punched is always a good question. If you're making a joke about cops, for example, and it features heavily gay people, but the target of the joke, the folks who are receiving the brunt of that impact, are cops, and that's not quite the same as, or like if you're like making a Stonewall reference or something, that's not the same as making a caricature of gay people for a skit. And then in the case of a caricature of a gay person, that one, the target is the gay community, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I tend to live I live and grew up in a pretty conservative, close-minded town. And so another kind of aspect of this is when you want to assume the best of people, some people aren't aware of certain stereotypes or aren't aware of the concept of punching up or punching down, which is also, I don't know if you had planned to talk about this, but why research can be so important, especially if you are representing a group that you are not a part of. And because a lot of times people will make jokes that they didn't realize even are offensive, which does not make them okay. They are not okay. Absolutely. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. But if you think that you're saying something completely in good fun, but you didn't realize that it actually has this really big, historical or social significance, then that the blame still falls on you. I think because you didn't do the proper research into the group that you're attempting to represent. And I think it's generally a good rule not to make fun of, minorities.
Hot tip.
Yeah, I just like to say just a lot of the things that you'll see, straight cis het guys get defensive about when this sort of thing comes up is you'll see this response of, oh, so we just can't joke about this anymore? No.
Yeah.
There are ways that you can tell jokes about trans people, about gay people, that don't punch at trans people, at gay people. I'm drawing a blank on some of his specific work, but James Acaster comes to mind as an example of a very funny comedian who is a straight white dude who tells good jokes about trans people that aren't attacking at trans people. And I've seen a few examples of other comedy, both intentional and unintentional, that are trans jokes by straight people that aren't jokes at the expense of trans people.
Yeah, it's consider who you're laughing with versus who you're laughing at.
Yes.
In the case of, there's a couple of very classic movies that feature the late Robin Williams, where being trans is kind of the butt of the joke. I believe Mrs. Doubtfire is one, and I'm forgetting the name of the other. A friend actually just told me about it the other day.
I think it's the Birdcage.
Yes, it's the Birdcage. And that one's actually a double hitter in that it also partially targets the gay community, although they're less outright the target of it. And that one at least does, at least in setup, attempt to mock homophobia itself. And there's been a series throughout shows. A show that is near and dear to Ian and I's heart, or well, I don't know if I should say that, but it's a show we've watched and a show we continue to watch against our better judgment. Ruby.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is a well-known factor with people who I am friends with that I am awful at consuming media, just in general. So I don't know much about Ruby. All I know, what was the thing you were talking about, Maya, that you learned about? Oh, the Black Panthers through Ruby.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all I know. I know 3D CGI animation, I think. Big weapons, pretty ladies. That's what I got, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good summary for most of this show, but we're actually talking about one of the men in this show this time around. Character known to pretty much most fans of the show and a lot of people who aren't, Jean Arc. Pretty early on in the show, I think in the first season or maybe the second season.
It's the second season.
Is depicted wearing a dress, and it's played for laughs. Now, there is some good here in that the show does, through its structure, sort of attack the men can't wear dresses, which is the whole mess, but right, the conceit there itself does have some issues in that, yeah, there's going to be people that are hurt by this.
It's the entire setup there is that there's a joke where the punchline is man wears dress.
Yeah.
And that is that's kind of in bad taste.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like
as a general concept.
Yeah, I feel like you could even like twist it and make it, again, I don't know the exact joke that you're referencing to, but if you were to instead twist the punchline to man wears dress and is ridiculed for it, look at how ridiculous that ridicule is, and you instead focus on like that bigotry, that could end up with a better joke if you're trying to critique, the ridiculousness of whether or not men can wear dresses. That ridiculousness of the, gender roles and such, then that could potentially end up with a better joke. But if it's just a man wears dress, then you fall into both stereotypical, and like a repeated kind of trope, unfortunately, and also punching down.
Yeah, you said that pretty well.
Yeah. I hope I didn't
awkwardness
interrupt.
Of getting back into... Oh, no, you're good. It's okay. Awkwardness of getting back into the swing of things. We've taken some time off.
Okay.
Gotta brush off the keyboard, get the rust out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also unused to this format and learning as I go. So
yeah,
it's a bit of both.
Not to mention we're a little off kilter this morning anyways.
Yes.
Yeah,
on
I'm
top
sure.
of it being an area that Ian and I are not super well versed in. I mostly do comedy by accident. I don't even punch up or punch down. I go, haha, funny, explosive.
Explosive. Yeah, I a lot of my comedy tends to be accidental as well. Either just like I'll sometimes fall into like I say something and other people interpret it as funny, or like my favorite genre of humor is probably absurdism. Which absurdism is so good.
Yeah.
But it unfortunately, I feel like it falls a little bit out of the realm of punching up and punching down. It can still definitely impact that, depending on what you are critiquing with absurdism and, you know, what exactly the subjects are. But it's not as one-to-one as like a stand-up comedy about the real world, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely ways for absurdism to be bigoted. It just depends on what you consider absurd. Example, the man in dress joke mentioned earlier functions off of the concept of that being kind of an absurd occurrence.
Yeah.
We're almost straying into the topic of what exactly is comedy.
Oh, God. That is something I'm not qualified to speak on. Christ.
Why are things funny?
No.
Well, actually, I think I do have a kind of a general answer here. And things are funny when they subvert expectations.
Yes.
In a particular way. Suddenly.
Yeah.
That's a solid definition for comedy. It's almost entirely unusable, which is how you know it's a good definition.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's kind of why absurdism works off of that at a very kind of fundamental level, in that it's just completely taking something way backwards, right?
Yeah.
I took off my glasses. I can't hear.
Yeah. I thought you were saying that literally instead of like citing a joke.
I did take my glasses off. I mean, that is actually kind of where I'm at now at this point, where I have to watch things with both subtitles and audio. I get upset if I don't have both.
I can't listen. I can't hear without my subtitles. Like I will be having conversations and like I'm like, oh, what did you just say? If only there were subtitles, which is it's a privileged position to like get to turn subtitles on because I want to have them, you know, rather than like being hard of hearing and needing them.
In my case, I have them on a lot because I drop audio a lot because I have an audio processing disorder.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
Which is part of why I can't actually listen to podcasts, despite
being
on one.
You love the irony. I think I'm using that term right. Again, I know a lot. Like I can speak a lot to like academia and like, you know, high structured like writing, but I think when it falls into the more subjective territory is when it gets a bit harder to speak on like critically and academically. And then again, if we were to return to punching up versus punching down, it becomes a bit harder to, you know, critique it, I think. I think it's difficult to critique and to analyze comedy. That might just be my sheer inexperience with it. Or, you know, lack of knowledge about it. But I also think that like when you take something that is meant to be like not serious and then you turn around and you try to analyze it, which you should, I think that you should analyze everything. But then you get okay, yeah, you're right. God, you don't even want to see me in like peak literature major, like my peak literature major state. Like I can I've close read the title of a book, Maya. Like it's not even funny. But when you fall into that more not serious part, then I think it becomes a bit harder to critique and to analyze. And then a lot of people fall back on that shielding of like, I always hear the defense of like, oh, I was just being funny, or I was just making a joke. And like, just because you weren't taking something seriously doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility to not be bigoted about it, whether intentional or unintentional.
Yeah, and there's also the concept of whether or not you intend for harm to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Harm that gets done is still done.
Exactly.
And just because something is comedic doesn't mean that it's not serious.
Yeah,
comedy can absolutely be a excellent vehicle for a social commentary. When you apply that absurdist lens to social conventions, like if you take that setup of punchline is man wears dress, and then you go a little further to show, wait, why is this funny? Should this be funny? Why are we laughing? That can be a actual appropriate use, perhaps, of that. I think one of the masters of using comedy as social commentary through absurdism is Sir Terry Pratchett, GNU Sir Terry, and we will be talking about him at the end of the month.
Ooh.
Stay tuned for that.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to that.
And we'll probably be talking more about comedy as social commentary in general next week when we're talking about satire.
Yes, I thought I knew where you were going with this.
So did
mention.
I.
I did not. I expected to see a mention of Jojo Rabbit, I believe, which was directed by Taika Waititi. Which
I haven't seen Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah,
good.
me either, unfortunately. Not a surprise, but you know.
It's a movie that deals with the rise of fascism in Nazi Germany, and it's a comedy. And it does one of the things I think is actually really a good way of dealing with fascists. And it makes fun of them. It makes them look pathetic.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is a good way to deal with fascists. Make them look pathetic.
Don't.
It is an ideology that is entirely based around putting up a facade of strength. And
Exactly.
if you rip that down, whether that is by punching them in the face, which is always based, or just metaphorically punch them in the face with comedy.
Yeah. You're never punching down when you're punching at a fascist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. It is always acceptable to punch fascists, whether that's physically or with your words.
Yeah. Undeniably.
I wanted an adjective there, but words are hard.
Physically or verbally?
Words. Yes. Thank you.
Words. Thank you.
My primary function is I also work as a dictionary or a thesaurus.
It's been a hot minute since I've read a dictionary. I should do that again.
Again?
I got
What,
in
you
trouble
don't read a
once.
dictionary for fun?
No!
In 4th or 5th grade for sitting down in class with the class dictionary and just reading it like a book instead of paying attention.
Oh my god. I remember, that's giving me flashbacks to like 4th or 5th grade. Did you used to walk around with a book in your hands? Like when like they were leading like the line, like the class line to like recess or like lunch or whatever? Did anybody ever
What
do
you
that?
mean used to? I still read and walk.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not. I don't know if I still have that skill, because I read so much now. A lot of it is against my will for classes. A lot of people say a lot of people don't read for literature classes, but I try to. That's completely off
I've not
topic.
had a literature class in ages. Yes.
Completely
there
off
was
topic.
an on-topic segment that I wanted to do before we got distracted. ADHD talking hour.
My
was
favorite.
With fascists are always acceptable targets, ethical targets of jokes.
Yeah,
Who
they
are
are.
they?
Yeah.
Yes, so as we mentioned, fascists are always ethical targets of jokes. Who else
Yes.
is? Well, generally the rich.
Yeah.
Political parties, always ethical targets of jokes. Fascists. Them fuckers. Nazis.
But you repeat
Jen-
yourself.
Yes, well, I didn't want to also say Republicans because then I'd have a hat trick of repeating myself.
Yeah, I think anybody with enough socio-political power to like really influence things are generally always ethical targets of jokes.
Yes, Joanne Rowling, to name another.
Oh, undeniably, she's always an ethical target of jokes. Yeah, and she falls into the rich billionaire, lot of
Rich, billionaire,
political
white, asshole,
Yeah.
lots of socio-political power because
Oh god, she's such
pretty
a
much
wasp.
anyone in the UK who makes fun of her or even calls her a TERF gets sued.
Yeah,
And if that ain't some thin-skinned shit, I don't know what is.
it is.
UK libel laws are some bullshit, but fortunately, doesn't apply here in the United States.
Yeah, we're
Just
not in
where
the
this
UK.
podcast is based.
So we can tell Joanne to go suck it.
In fact, we just did. Now,
So true.
just because there are always ethical targets for jokes doesn't mean there are always ethical jokes. And that's an important distinction.
Yes.
Sarah, I believe you had one you wanted to mention?
Yeah, something to be aware of is the intersection when you're making these jokes between like the person you're making the jokes about and the types of jokes that you are making. So one that I commonly see, and this may hit a particular nerve because I am a fat woman, but when people make jokes about Donald Trump, who is always ethical to make jokes about, but they make jokes about his weight, or when people make jokes about Republicans, again, always ethical, but the joke is that AI has drawn them in drag. Stuff like that, where the physical person target of your joke is acceptable, but the group for plus size people or for drag queens, those people are minorities. You are punching down with that group, despite the fact that you are making a joke about a person who is always ethical to make a joke about. And so you get
there's splash damage. You want your jokes to not be horseshoes, hand grenades, or nuclear weapons. They should be personalized and hand delivered.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I forgot what else I was going to say, but that's okay.
Yeah, there's also kind of some interplay of self-deprecating jokes, which I am no stranger to. I certainly make fun of myself a lot, especially for my short attention span and the capacity to forget everything I've ever been told.
I think that's common to a lot of
Relatable.
us with ADHD.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you're making fun of someone for traits, and even if that someone is yourself, other people with those traits could very well be there and be hurt by said joke, which obviously you don't really want to hurt anyone if you're making jokes about yourself.
Yeah.
Man, we kind of ran through that material really quick.
We did, but that's
We did.
okay. We did. I don't know how much more there is to say besides what we've already said. I mean, I don't know. It's difficult. I think it's a little difficult because we all kind of agree. And so sometimes making more. No, I lost what I was going to say. My attention span left.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Ian mentioned James Acaster earlier this episode.
Mhm.
And actually went and pulled up for myself one of his skits that he did that he actually became quite popular for. And it's James Acaster using trans people in a joke to attack Ricky Gervais, who was, I believe at the time, catching heat for making transphobic jokes. And it's an excellent example of how you can make jokes, include trans people in the jokes, but not make fun of trans people.
Yes.
Even though trans people are an essential vehicle to the joke joke, which functions around stand-up comedy, comedians seeing themselves as challenging their viewers. Well, trans people kind of already have enough that they have to deal with and challenging them. Their guard's already up, man. No need to kick them when they're down.
Yeah.
But you, a rich person, on the internet screaming and complaining about people getting upset when you make fun of them, you've kind of got it easy, man. I'm obviously heavily paraphrasing, but it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I think that's
that may actually have been the skit that introduced me to James Acaster in the first place.
I wish I had gone and watched it. Yeah, I think that makes a really good point about, I guess I'd be restating what you were already saying, but how just because you aren't part of like a group doesn't mean that you can't include them in both in writing in general and in comedy, as long as you do the research and you put in the work to make sure that you are not accidentally punching down with it.
Yeah. Now, something to punish Dylan for not showing up. I'm just kidding, Dylan. We love you. We also want to talk about cases of comedy and punching up in a series that is near and dear to all of our hearts, and we are very normal about. That is The Locked Tomb. One of the things that Tamsin Muir's series is very well known for and is often praised for is its sense of humor and the use of comedy.
Yes.
And Muir manages to do much of it without terribly much punching at all. Most of the jokes are meme references.
Yes. Meme references, or again, falling a bit more into like absurdist or a lot of like character dialogue, rather than intentional punching, which is a definite way that you can do comedy. Like, you don't always have to have specific targets. Not
Licked her,
every.
I barely knew her.
Yeah, a lot of comedy, like, I think in talking about responsible jokes and punching up and punching down is very important, and perhaps you have future episodes talking about just like comedy in general. But if you are uncertain about, like how you should make a joke about certain people or whatever, you could always just opt to not go for that form of comedy.
Yeah. You can always choose to just not do it. Just walk out, you can leave.
You can hit the bricks if it sucks, man. I think that's a lot of Mir's comedy. It's not punching at anybody in particular, although she does punch at some groups later on, like we were talking about before we started recording, in like Nona and stuff like that.
Yes, but in the third book, there are jokes that target in particular the US government, which is another case of an always acceptable target. It's a massive institution that has a lot of socioeconomic power. It's actually kind of hard to get more than what the US has.
Yeah.
Literally the most powerful nation on Earth, currently.
Yeah.
For better or more likely for worse.
Yeah. And so just to be specific about the joke for people who, like me, didn't remember it until we were talking about it, when John, who is also always an acceptable person to make a joke at, when he creates a corpse puppet for a very powerful government with access to nuclear bombs and a suitcase nuke, I think it targets a lot of the aspects. It's not specifically mentioned to be the U.S. government, but it's likely the U.S. government.
That's what everyone's interpreted it as, and that makes the most sense. It becomes a literal puppet state.
Yeah.
Which is certainly ironic, given that pretty much all of the states that have potential to be the target of that joke have made numerous puppet states themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. is infamous for doing that all over Latin America.
Yeah.
Or attempting to do so and failing miserably in the case of Cuba.
Yeah, and so it becomes a really effective bit, kind of turning... What was I going to say? I forgot it. I'm so sorry. for all the future editing you're going to have to do.
Brain hard, no work.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Again, this is something that isn't my specialty, and so like I think my brain has tried so hard to like pull good takes that I'm starting to run on fumes. But that's okay. Hopefully.
That's understandable. I believe I mentioned earlier, this is not really my area either. I write humor rather than comedy. I just, make puns and stuff. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, puns are automatically funny.
Indeed.
As Magnus Quinn has given to us in the gospel that is Gideon the Ninth. Yeah, God, I'm rereading Gideon the Ninth, and it's such a good book.
It's such a good book. I need to
such a good book.
I intend to get additional trade paperback copies of all the books and annotate them, because that's
nice.
I'll be real, that's where I'm at.
I'm literally when I was reading Harrow for the first time, I was already annotating it, and then I'm going back and reading Gideon the Ninth and annotating it. And then when the Nona paperback comes out, I think I'm going to annotate that. I'm not going to annotate the hardcover of Nona though, because hardcover feels more sacred.
Yeah. Well, one of my copies of Nona is the Illumicrate version.
Ooh.
And
okay, yeah, you can't annotate that.
No,
you cannot.
I will not.
Jail if you even try.
Sacrilege.
Exactly. Yeah.
No one else is getting their hands
jail
on that
for
book.
10,000 years.
Is it a jail filled with acid?
Sour.
Sour?
Acids do usually taste sour.
And I love sour things, much to the detriment of my tongue.
How do you know that acid tastes sour?
Well,
chemistry.
Okay.
Also, vinegar is sour. Lemon juice is sour.
Vinegar is tasty.
Lemon juice is also tasty.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I don't know why I had the cartoon image of acid in my head, the bubbling green shit that Joker and Harley Quinn went into.
And according to me and Maya's mutual friend, hydrochloric acid tastes of both sour and pain.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have actually been around a bubbling green soup of acid.
Oh God!
I did not taste it.
Good. You heard it here first.
That was left in the lab overnight. I wasn't the one who made this. But a couple of guys at one of the labs I worked in, and I'm going to leave out as many details as I can so no one gets in trouble, but...
Oh, God. That's how you always know a story's going to be good.
We left it... We couldn't put it in our hazardous material disposal bin because we didn't... Or, well, I say we as if I was involved with this. I was not. I was doing a different project in the lab at the time. They didn't know what entirely was going on. It was very high concentration acid, and then a lot of things went wrong, which led to it being green and bubbling.
Mm-hmm.
So they placed it in Teflon and glass containers and let it sit in a corner of the lab over a weekend.
The punishment corner for naughty acids. Naughty acids go sit in the corner.
The standard container for the hazardous materials bin is a plastic that's going to be somewhat acid resistant, but it's not, it's not perfect. Yeah. There's some really strong acids out there, and this was probably strong enough to eat through that. So if this started to leak and eat through stuff, that was a major hazard.
Yeah.
And they're telling us this story on a Friday at a meeting across the research group. Mm-hmm. The professor's there, and we're all, chatting before the meeting really gets going. As we all sit down to start the meeting, the fire alarm goes off.
Oh, no!
There's a voice over the comms basically just saying that the building has become hazardous and to evacuate.
Oh, no.
We all flip out, and...
Oh, no!
Yeah. We're concerned.
Yeah.
And we file out with the rest of the building, and we immediately look towards the corner of the building where our lab is situated. We were having a meeting on basically opposite corner of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking for smoke or something. And we can't find anything. We're terrified. We're like, oh no, something's wrong. Something's wrong. There's no way it wasn't. As it turns out, it was just a drill.
Oh.
And they told no one.
Okay. Good. Jesus. Yeah, that vaguely reminds me of my high school chemistry teacher, who certainly was a man.
Oh boy.
At one point, he was truly like when you think of a mad scientist, like he kind of fell into that. Speaking of acids, one time, we don't know how it happened, but my lab partner was touching like one of the sinks that we use. And her hand started burning.
Oh, no.
So she went over to him and he was like, oh no, let me like test the thing. And I don't remember exactly like how or why, but he had like a sponge with something on it that was supposed to turn black if there was a high concentration of acids. And he like rubbed the sponge over it and it just went like pitch black. Another time another time before school started, I'm like sitting on the bus. We're all waiting to get off. And then administrators and all the people who got driven in come out and they go, you can't go in the building. And we're like, why not? And they're like, well, Mr. Redacted was doing like an experiment before school started and set off the fire alarm. And then one time he was telling us about how he kept doing an experiment to see if he could run over a car like they do in the movies. And I was like, because I'm a chatterbox, I never shut the hell up. I was like, well, how high was... Yeah, good, I'm glad. I was like, well, how high was your vertical jump? And he was like, no, my vertical jump was fine. Watch this. And he jumped up onto a student's desk, like out of nowhere. Yeah. So he certainly was something. Hope he's doing okay now.
Well, before we get too off track with stories of chemistry shenanigans, because I have several. Let's go ahead
as funny as these stories are, this is a episode about jokes, not just about humor.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
We do actually, for once, the first time on the show, we have mail, don't we, Ian?
We do!
Yaj.
I would like to read this email that we got. It is the first email that we have received, first comment that we have received that was not from, someone that we kind of personally know. Thanks for commenting on our first few episodes, Shand. But this is from listener Elise, and she says, hey, I found your podcast a few weeks ago and have been listening through the episode since. Fanfiction is a thing I am, of course, very normal about, and so it's been very interesting to find a show that discusses it. I like how in-depth you go towards specific genres and tropes, and how, with multiple people, there's a variety of views and good discussion every episode. As an ace who only reads platonic fics, strange but true, I really appreciated the episode dedicated to platonic shipping. It's so often overlooked, but good platonic relationships are very meaningful and add so much to works. My personal favorite platonic ship dynamic is chaotic sibling vibes, but the whole found family trope is amazing and can be used for everything from fluff to angst. Good luck with Season 2. Season 1 was great, even if I haven't read much of what you reference except the Cosmere. It all sounds very good, though, and I'm planning to start reading the Dresden Files soon based on the recommendation. It's an honor and is also making me kind of nervous to be the first letter, unless another has answered the call before me. Good luck again, Elise. You're the first, Elise.
You are, and
Such
it is
sweet
a
letter.
bit of a shame that I actually already heard this. Ian read this off to me before we recorded, because I whooped several times when Ian originally read the letter off. It's very sweet. Thank you very much. This means a lot. I am glad specifically that our some of our episodes have touched you personally. That was the intent when we came up with them and recorded them, was that they would matter to people on a personal level. I'm glad they've been able to do that. And I'm glad to hear that. I'm excited for you to start the Dresden Files. I love that series. I'm very normal about it. We absolutely have to have an episode on it at some point.
Very normal.
Yes. Well, Elise, thank you for writing to us. I hope you share this podcast with all of your friends. Your letter has made our week, possibly our month.
Oh, almost certainly our month.
That is such a beautiful letter. I'm honored to be on the episode that gets the first letter. Like, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
Well, we have received our first letter. We still don't have any reviews over on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else that I'm aware of that will allow you to leave a review. So if, like Elise, you are enjoying our show, please leave us a rating and or review on whatever service you use to catch this pod. You can, if you want to reach out to us by email, you can get us at fanfictapes@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us on Twitter.
Yes, we are at Fanfiction Tapes on Twitter. We tweet about events some of the cast is at. I was actually recently at Dallas Fan Expo. And also we tweet about other things because I'm in charge of the Twitter. We tweet about our episodes. And you can find us there. If you send us stuff on the Twitter as well, we'll be certain to read it on the show. If you have any questions or anything like that, we'd love to hear from you.
All right. I think we've hit our word count for today.
Absolutely. Sarah, do you have anything you'd like to share with our listeners? Any social media or any works or anything?
Yeah, if you really want, you can find me on Archive of Our Own at The Sweetest Sapphic. That's about all I've got, honestly, though. A bunch of one-shots and some fics that I really need to finish.
Understandable.
Yes.
I have several things I need to finish and get back to. I haven't posted a fic in ages.
Yeah, same. I'm surprised. Yeah.
Well, I'm not surprised that much about my end because
oh no,
school sucked.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened on my end. I managed to churn out a bunch of fics when I was like in the throes of a really intense job, and then like smash cut to me taking like 3 classes this last semester, and I'm like, oh no, I can't write.
Oof. Yeah.
So hopefully I'll get back into it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll be all for this week, folks. I am and have been your host, Maya.
I am honored to be here. I've been your guest, Sarah.
And as always, I am the producer, Ian. Until next time, bye.